Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. We are learning Maseches Gittin Daf Mem Tes, and we're starting 4 lines from the top. And we had just learned a brisa yesterday, and the brisa was about Meitav Sadehu Meitav Karmo. Do we say b'den nizak shaiminan that we assess when I'm paying you back for damages? Do I assess based on your version of idis, of the best, or my version of idis, b'den nizak shaiminan, or b'den mazik shaiminan? And at the very top of the page, and we're going to actually start from the top line because it just is a smooth transition. Hacha b'maya skinan. What was the brisa talking about? Kigon shahaisa idis de nizak kiziburis de mazik. When the idis of the nizak and the ziburis of the mazik are the same. So the best of the nizak was like the worst of the mazik. Rabbi Shmuel Savar that in such a case, b'den nizak shaiminan. Rabbi Kiva Savar b'den mazik shaiminan. That is still mazik, which is a chumrah. That means that the mazik has to pay from a better field. It's not from his field that's a ziburis, but rather from his field that's an idis. Even though the ziburis of the mazik is the idis of the nizak, so we follow by the mazik shaimina. My time with the Rabbi Shmuel. Why does Rabbi Shmuel hold that we follow the nizak? Because ne'emra sadeh lemata v'ne'emra sadeh lemala, both in the same pasuk. Ma sadeh ha'amura lemala de nizak, af sadeh ha'amura lemata de nizak. So because one sadeh is by definition speaking about a case scenario where someone is a nizak, it must therefore be that by payments also that we're talking about a nizak. Rabbi Akiva, why do you hold differently? Why do you say it's b'demazik shaiminon? Says the Gemara, because Savar meitav sadehu yeshalem dehoich dekameshalem. Listen to the language. Meitav sadehu, from the best of his fields, he should pay. Pashut pshat in the pasuk is talking about the mazik. So Rabbi Akiva couldn't understand the other way. How could you even say it's about that? I understand your hashva in words, but lamaisa, the pasuk seems to be talking about me, the mazik. If I damage you, how am I mishalim? Meitav sadeu yashalim. You should pay from the best of his fields. Rabbi Akiva is just looking at the basic text. I have a Rabbi Shmuel. What would you say about that response? It's a wonderful response. The Gemara says a quarter of the way down, ahani gzera shava v'ahani kra. Not only does my gzera shava of sadeh work, but your pasuk also works in my favor also. Let's see how. Ahani gzera shava lechada amran. That was the gzera shava we saw a couple of lines ago. That the reason why Rabbi Shmuel holds b'den nizak shaiminan is because sadeh was said in 2 places. We have a gzera shava. Ahani kra. How does the pasuk work out in favor of Rabbi Shmuel? The isle lemazik idis viziburis. That if who's one? The isle the mazik. If the mazik has both great fields and not such great fields, viziburis today. And the worst fields of the mazik, lo shavya ki idis de nizak, are not the same of the idis of the nizak, then the mishalem lemi meitab. Then we'll break the rules and we'll say that then I agree with you. You're right. In other words, you, Rabbi Akiva, who said that the pashut pshat of the pasuk is talking about a mazik, at times that's true. And says Rabbi Shmuel, what the pasuk means is that when the idis of the nizak and the ziboris of the mazik don't line up, then you're right. Then we do follow the mazik in that case. That's why the pasuk is saying that we should follow the mazik in that case. Okay, so these are the party lines. Rabbi Akiva holds b'de nizak shaiminan with an exception. Rabbi Akiva holds b'de mazik shaiminan. Now, yesterday in the brisa, after we had presented the sheet of Rabbi Shmuel, the Gemara in this brisa quoted the following line that we're about to learn now. Rabbi Akiva Omer lo ba'hakasuv ela legabos lenizakin min ha'idis. Lo ba'akasuv, them's are fighting words, as we'll soon see in the Gemara. He was arguing with Rabbi Shmuel. And he says, no, the pasuk is only coming to teach us legabos lenizakin min ha'idis, that we need to collect for those who have damages. We need to collect from properties that are idis. And then we added these cryptic words, v'kal v'chomer lehektish. All the more so in regards to hektish. We don't know what this means yet. So says the Gemara, my kal v'chomer lehektish. What is the kal v'chomer to hektish? So says the Gemara as follows. Ilema, if you want to say, denagche Torah didon leTorah dehektish, that a regular person, let's say I'm a regular person, I'm not the Beis HaMikdash. Let's say that my shore was nagach, it gores the Torah de hektish. It gores a sheep that belongs to hektish, or gores a shore that belongs to hektish. So says the Gemara, the rules over there are different than the rules over here. The rules in regards to my animal hurting your animal were both regular people. Shor re'ehu amarachman v'lo shor shel hektish. The regular rules of shor re'ehu don't apply, and therefore you can't even compare the two worlds of Shor Re'ehu and Shor Re'ehu versus Shor Re'ehu and Hektish. Ella, therefore, what must the case be where there's a Kal V'chomer? Ella, maybe the case is La'omer, Harei Alai Mona Lebedek HaBayis. A person says that they're dedicating a mana to the Bedek HaBayis, to the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. In such a case, the Ozi Gizbar, the treasurer of the Beis HaMikdash, will show up at your property after he got your pledge in the mail, and now he's coming to collect. V'shakil mi'idis, and he's going to collect from the best of your properties. So if that's true, says the Gemara, Lo Yehei Ela Bal Chov. This person's like a regular Bal Chov. What did we learn in our Mishnah at the beginning of the parak yesterday on Mem Ches Mid Beis? We learned Bal Chov Dino Bebeinonis. A Bal Chov always collects from Beinonis. So how can you say that in this case, where a person pledges money to the Beis HaMikdash, that they're going to collect from Idis? That doesn't even hold up to the argument at all to our Mishnah. You can't say that when you're a Bal Chov to the Beis HaMikdash, it's Idis, and when you're a Bal Chov Stam to another friend, that it's going to be Beinonis. We follow the regular rules. And if you want to say that perhaps Kasava Rabbi Akiva, Bal Chov Shakil Be'idis Kinizakin, that Rabbi Akiva argues and says that a Bal Chov also can take from Idis, just like a regular injured person, like a regular person who's been damaged. Ikal Mifrach, I can argue it in the following way. Mala Bal Chov sheken yafe kocha b'nizakin, that when it comes to a Bal Chov, he's in a very good position as it relates to damages. Tomar behektish sheken hura kocha b'nizakin, that in regards to them, it's in regards to hektish, it's actually not the case that the rules of hektish are weaker than the rules of a regular Bal Chov. So there too, we can't say that that's going to be our kal v'chomer lehektish. And then the Gemara presents another possibility. We're 2/3 of the way down on Mem Tes Amud Aleph, and the Gemara says as follows. La'olam, let's go back to answer number 1. La'olam denagche Torah didan l'Torah dehektish. Really, my animal, my shore, gored a shore that belonged to Hektish. And Rabbi Akiva savar like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. And Rabbi Shimon holds like, and Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. The Tanya says the Gemara, Stama machlokes tanoi. The Brisa writes, Reb Shimon ben Menasya Omer, Shor shel Hektish, Shenagach l'Shor shel Hedyot Pater. If the Hektish's shore gores my private shore, then in such a case, Hektish is Pater. However, v'shel Hedyot Shenagach l'Shor shel Hektish, but in the reverse case, where my personal animal gores an animal that belongs to Hektish, Bein tamu vein muad mishalem nezek shalem, which is equivalent to idis. That's a real possibility. That's a real possibility, and that's the answer that the Gemara seems to accept. Is that the kal v'chomer that we're talking about when we say the kal v'chomer lehektish is that in regards to hektish, all the more so it's true because we hold like Reb Shimon ben Menasya, who says that bein tam bein muad, if my private animal gores an animal that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, he collects from idis. Good. So says the Gemara, if this is the way we're understanding Rabbi Akiva, then I don't understand why you defined our machlokes at the top of the page the way that you did. That we have this case of Reb Shimon ben Menasya, that shor shel hektish, a shor shel hedyot, shenagach shor shel para is going to be mishalem beidis. So then mimai de beidis de nizak kiziboris de mazik pliki. Perhaps the machlokes that we see at the top of the page that we started with today of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, perhaps that machlokes is not about b'denizak shaiminan uvedemazik shaiminan. Perhaps the machlokes isn't about that at all. Perhaps the only machlokes is dilma dekule alma b'denizak shaiminan. Maybe even Rabbi Akiva would agree that we follow the nizak's standards. And perhaps the machlokas that we saw in the brisa that we started with yesterday, the brisa that's 2/3 of the way down on Mem Ches Mid Beis, perhaps that machlokas is just whether or not Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel hold like Reb Shimon ben Menasya. The Rabbi Akiva savar like Reb Shimon ben Menasya, and because Rabbi Akiva holds like Reb Shimon ben Menasya, therefore we have to collect from idis, because that's what he says is the case when a regular shore injures the shore of hektish. And Rabbi Shmuel savar like Rabbanan that's not true. So maybe that's the case, that really there is no machlokes in the case that we started with. Let's review the Gemara's question here, because it's an important one, and it will help us to understand the next many lines. We started at the beginning of the day today saying that the Brisa on Mem Ches Mid Beis was discussing a case where the idis of the nizak in Ziboris of the mazik were the same. And there we had a machlokas if we said like Rabbi Shmuel b'din Nizak shaiminan or like Rabbi Akiva b'din mazik shaiminan. Says the Gemara lav dafka. Maybe the whole machlokas is about whether or not we hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh and not that case of idis de Nizak kiziboris de mazik. To this, the Gemara has a triple rejection. You have a question?
No.
Oh, I thought you were.
No,
I thought you had a question face. It is difficult to hold calm. So says the Gemara.
Advantage of your recap.
Yes. So the Gemara says that it's not possible to say that Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva aren't arguing in the case we started with. In other words, they're definitely arguing in the case of idis de nizak kiziboris de mazik. How do I know? Says the Gemara for three reasons. Im kain my lo bo hakasuv. When Rabbi Akiva in the Brisa and Memches and Beis retorted against Rabbi Shmuel with the words lo bo hakasuv, that you only say those words when you disagree with the person before you. So Pashat that they were arguing in our Brisa. The Ode, and furthermore, if we say that there's no machlokas in regards to the case of idis de nizak and kiziboris de mazik, then the whole kal v'chomer lehektish makes no sense, and that can't be either. And then the third reason, last line of Mem Tesamad Aleph, the Ode, Ha'amar Ravashi, as we turn to the top of Mem Tesamad Beis, Tanya Behedya. We have another brisa, black on white. Meitav sadehu meitav karmo yeshalem. That's what the pasuk says. What's the drasha? Meitav sadehu shel nizak, umeitav karmo shel nizak. Divi Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva Omer meitav sadehu shel mazik, umeitav karmo shel mazik. There's nothing to talk about. There is definitely a machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel in regards to the case that we started with on the top of Mem Tesamad Aleph, when idis de nizak kiziboris de mazik. Rabbi Akiva holds in such a case b'de nizak. Rabbi Akiva holds b'de mazik shaiminan, and Rabbi Shmuel holds b'de nizak shaiminan. But yes, David, you're correct. It's hard to hold kappa. Now, 4 lines down, we're actually being brought back a full amud. Yesterday, we were bothered by the fact that our Mishnah referred to being paid by idis as tikkun olam. This was something that annoyed us. And at the open of the Gemara in the name of Abaye said that it was all according to Rabbi Yishmael, that really mideoraisa b'denizik shaiminan, but for the sake of tikkun olam, it's b'demazik shaiminan. That was our initial answer. Ravina now is going to give another answer to this question. Why does our Mishnah refer to the payback of idis as a tikkun olam, l'chora t'din deoraisa? So it says the Gemara, Mem Testament Beis, 4 lines down. Ravina Amar le'olam masnisa Rabbi Akiva. Really, our Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva, who holds b'demazik shaiminan. To Amar, he holds mideoraisa b'demazik shaiminan. So why, if you hold b'demazik shaiminan, does our Mishnah say tikkun olam? Says the Gemara, Reb Shimon What's Reb Shimon's unique shita throughout Shas? Reb Shimon holds the darish time of the kra. There's 2 different halachic and hashkafic approaches here. Do we care why HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us to do something? Yes or no? Is it na'aseh v'nishma blindly? Or is there any halachic value into the why? Okay, in parenting, we know that sometimes we shut down our children's whys. I do this as a dad all the time. Answer number 1 as to why you have to do this is because I said so. And if you're looking for a deeper reason, I'm happy to share it with you, but it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, I'm the dad. This isn't a democracy. Go take a shower. So here, this is a machlokas tanaim. Do we care about being darshan time of the kra? Reb Shimon says we're darish time of the kra. So it says the Gemara, umatam ka'amar. The Brisa is just giving us a reason for the din deoraisa. How does it play out? Matam hanizakin shamin lahen beidis. Why is it, says Rabbi Akiva, why is it that our Mishnah, mideoraisa, why do we hold that we measure with a mazik? Mipnei tikkun ha'olam. The reason why the Torah says that we are mishair payment to the nizak from the perspective of the mazik is because of tikkun olam. What does this mean? The Tanya, 12 lines down, a little bit less, 10 lines down. Amar Reb Shimon, mipnei ma amru hanizakin shaman lahen beidis. Why is it that our Mishnah at the open of the parak says that according to Rabbi Akiva that we measure that which a mazik has to pay is from the mazik's perspective? Because it's a harder punishment when your property that you're paying for is a higher standard. Let's say that my A+ property is worth $1 million. Your A+ property is worth $700,000, and I'm the ganav. I'm the one who broke something of yours. If I have to pay, it's a more bitter pill to swallow that I have to give from the best of my properties. So that's why the Gemara says, the people who steal, the people who force purchase, whatever the case may be, that a person should say to themselves, Lama ani gozel v'lama ani chomes. So why would I steal? Lamais, is it really worth it for me to steal? And is it really worth it for me to force someone to give me something even if I pay him? Lamachar, tomorrow when Bezdin catches me, Bezdin Yordan lenachas. I have an old sadana shali. They're going to take my best field, my edis. And they're going to say it's based on a pasuk. Meitav sadeh, meitav karmo yishalem. Lefichach amru hanizakin shaman lahen beiditz. So why does our Mishnah say midnei tikkun olam? Hare, after all, the words tikkun olam sound. I mean, it sounds derabanan at most. At most, the words tikkun olam. Forget about what secular society has done to the words tikkun olam. Forget that. That's a joke. Forget that. But in halachic terms, tikkun olam sounds derabanan. Says the Gemara, it does sound that way, but really, within Ravina's approach, the din of tikkun olam is just expressing the why behind the what. The what is that b'demazik shaiminon, and we have to charge him from his A+ property of edis. Why? Mipnei tikkun olam, and it's like Reb Shimon who's doresh time of the crow. Good. We are about a third of the way down, a quarter of the way down, and we're actually in the middle of the brisa. Now, this brisa that we're learning was just used to explain Ravina's approach to our Mishnah, that Reb Shimon holds that really midoraisa, it's idis, and it's because of tikkun olam. The brisa continues, and it will actually shift us into another part of the sugya, and the brisa reads as follows. Why is it that in our Mishnah, mipnei ma amru bal chov bebeinanis, why is it that when we said that a Baal Chov gets to, let's say I owe you money and I default, so you can come collect from my B fields, from my Beinanis fields. Why? Let's say that you wanted to borrow from me. You're like, wow, I wouldn't mind if Phil defaulted on a payment and I can get his A+ land. So that's not appropriate. And therefore, v'yomar ekvotz ve'alvenu, I'm going to jump at the opportunity. I'm going to loan money to Phil, kedei she'agavenu b'chovi, so that when I collect from him, I can collect from his beautiful Yerushalayim apartment. That sounds like a great idea. It says the Gemara, lefichach amru, no, you can't play this scam game. We're not doing that. Lefichach amru ba'alei chov bebeinanis. That's just it's a middle of the road approach. It's still a good thing. You still get the B properties and not the A properties, but it prevents people from being sneaky in who they loan to. If in fact you're concerned that a person may say ekpotz ve'alvenu, you're afraid that someone's going to play the sneaky game, so then yehei bezibris. Then why don't you just say that loans for a Baal Chov get paid back from the worst fields? Then nobody will ever be tempted by the A+ fields or the B fields. We're only going to be collecting from the C fields. It says the Gemara, because then people who are going to want to borrow won't have any lenders. There has to be some skin in the game. So what we say is you're ineligible to collect. If I default, you're not allowed to collect from my A properties. But you know what? You also aren't going to be collecting from my C properties. We're gonna thread the needle here, and you can collect from my B properties. Let's move on to the next part of the brisa, which is also reflecting the next part of the Mishnah that we started with. Ksuvas isha beziboris divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That when a woman gets married, her ksuba is allowed to be collected from, if he doesn't have cash, from his C properties. And Rav Meir Omer Beinanis, he says that she can collect her ksuba, the value of her ksuba, from your B properties and not your C properties. Amar Reb Shimon, mipnei ma amru ksuvas isha beziboris. Why does this shita hold this way? Why does Reb Yehuda hold that a woman's ksuva, if a man defaults in payments, why do we hold that she collects from ziboris? Says the Gemara, a hashkafa, which has an interplay with halacha. Sheyoser mimasha ish rotzelisa, more than the typical man wants to marry. Ha'isha rotzelinase, a woman wants to be married. So in her mind, she doesn't mind if the properties that are behind her ksuba are ziboris. She doesn't mind. Davar acher, there's another reason that's presented in the Gemara, though one that seems to not really be directly connected to this. Isha yotza lirtzona v'shelo lirtzona. A woman can leave a marriage at her will and against her will. V'ha'ish eino motzia elo lirtzono. And a man can only leave a marriage at his own will, lirtzono, at his own desire when he wants to leave, meaning a woman cannot force him out of the marriage. So says the Gemara, what is this case of davar acher? My davar acher. We're halfway down on Mem Tes Amud Beis. We will be going to the very last line of the page. My davar acher. B'chi tema ki hechi decha mafik la ihu. Just like where the mafik la ihu, where he's allowed to let her go, and in such a case takinu la rabbanan ksuba minei, and in such a case the chachamim gave her a ksuba because he's pushing her out. So then, therefore, in the reverse, kinafka ihi, perhaps we would have said that when she is trying to end the marriage, nami liskine le rabbanan ksuba mina, then maybe he should get a ksuba from her. So says the Gemara that that's not the case. That's why we have this line of davar acher, that we should say that even if a woman is chappering her husband until he agrees in the end, he's been coerced. He doesn't want to, please divorce me every single day, please divorce me. He's like, fine. Maybe we should say that he should get a ksuba, just like she would get a ksuba when he pushes her out. That is in fact not the case. Tashma, we see a brisa, 2/3 of the way down. We had said, Isha yotza lirtzona v'shelo lirtzona. A woman can be removed with her own will and against her will. V'aish.
I don't think it's with her own will, just in her agreement. She can't demand per se.
So
It's only means where they're kind of in agreement, or min haTorah fi l'Balkara.
right,
Okay.
that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Although the previous case was not saying that. The previous case was saying where she forced him, like whatever forced means. Kinafka ihi nami, when she's pushing. So that's
I just think that they're in agreement.
right. Where is
Rashi? I've sort of been racking my brain for the last couple of minutes trying to understand.
in the case in the case of the V'chi Tema, which is 2/3 of the way down.
Yeah.
So that was the case where she pushes to get out of the marriage.
Right. But I mean,
but the typical
she
case
can
of
do it.
lirsona and shelo lirsona, like you're saying, there's two things happening. One is the V'chi Tema, which is that we had a havamina that if a woman pushes and pushes and pushes until her husband agrees, we might have thought that he gets a ksuba, kamash malan, that he doesn't get it.
In, so to speak.
Correct. So we thought that, but it's not true. But you're right. The case of lirtzona and shelo lirtzona is, I was probably translating a little
right.
mutual divorce or against her will. Right. That's a better definition. V'ha'ish eino motzi ela lirtzono. So efshar damashi lebagita, because he has a little bit of clout. He can try and work things out by not yet giving the get. Very dangerous line in the Gemara. But nevertheless, that is in fact how halacha has worked, and we try to put things in place to prevent agunos, v'chule, prenuptials, whatever the case may be. This brings us to the 2 dots and to a difficult sugya about ksubas isha biziboris that we had said in our Mishnah, and this brisa just above quoted this as well in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, that when a woman gets married, she is willing to accept ziboris as the properties behind the value.
Can I just point out,
Yeah.
because that's not really what the Gemara meant. After Damashi, if he didn't want to, he wouldn't have given it. Even the lo ashi.
Whoa, sorry, where are you?
Way up. After the Mashi law. It's maybe.
Oh, I got it. After the Mashi, he'll delay below Yoiv Lagita.
Delay, right.
And he won't give her a get.
The kivit, the lo ashi, when you see he's giving it and
Yeah.
not delay, Midaite Gersh. I don't think it's suggesting he can.
It's saying exactly that.
The Balkora, because it's all in his hands.
No, what he's saying here is that it is in his hands and he can delay to try to fix things up.
You know clearly.
For sure. For sure.
If he didn't want to, it's all in his hands. I don't think it's suggesting a tactic. It's all
It's not so much that we're like recommending it, it's that it's in his capacity, it's in his capacity to do so.
Once he does it, you can be clear. It's midaite because.
Mm-hmm. So what did the words Efshar Damashi La Begita have to do with the words before it? The case was a brisa. Isha Yotza Lirtzona V'Shelo Lirtzona.
It's always Biritzona.
Right, because he can always not divorce her.
Spirit, right? Then if he didn't want it, he would have done it.
Yeah.
I don't think Mashi means to hold back in.
It's exactly what it
in
means.
the sense that we see.
Oh, you're saying because of Aguna? No, I'm just saying, yeah.
He's married, but
yeah. I think we're saying two very close things. I'm not sure they're so different.
I was just a little.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then the Gemara picks up 2/3 of the way down at the 2 dots. Ksubas isha biziboris. There we had said in our Mishnah and in the Brisa that a woman can have a C quality property behind her ksuba. And Omar Mar Zutra Bereder Rav Nachman, this qualification is important to understand so we can follow the rest of the Gemara. What did he say? Lo Amran, when do we say that a woman collects ziboris when there's no cash for her ksuba? That's Elam Yasme, when her husband has died and the money is now relegated to the Yisomim. In such a case, she's only allowed to collect from ziboris. Aval Minei Didei. But if the husband is still alive and he defaults on the payments of the Masayim Zuz of the Ksuba, whatever amount is there, bebeinanis. So then she's kind of like a Balchov. Says the Gemara, Miyasme, if what you're saying is that it's from the Yisomim, and from the Yisomim, she can only collect ziboris, so then we have a problem. Because my area ksuvas isha. If what you're saying is, if that's the din of the Mishnah, is that when it says that you're collecting from a ziboris, that it's only when it's true from the Yisomim, the Mishnah already spoke about that case. Afilu kol milinami. Every case when dealing with the Yisomim is like that. The Hatznan, the Mishnah that we said in the beginning of this parak on Mem Chesam and Beis, what did we say? Eini frem nichse Yisomim elamina ziboris. So if it's true, Mar Zutra in the name of Rav Nachman, if it's true that you're qualifying our Mishnah to say that when it says that the ksuva of an Isha can be collected from the C quality properties of Ziboris, that's when it's from the Yisomim, there is zero chiddush in that line. Why? Because the Mishnah on Mem Ches Mud Beis already told us that in all cases of Yisomim, you always collect Ziboris. It says the Gemara, Elalav, it must therefore be that our Mishnah is not talking like you, Rav Nachman, and rather Minei, she's collecting from him and collecting from him Biziboris. So says the Gemara, great argument, but really La'olam Yasme, really, it is still the case that there's a distinction between Yisomim and the husband, and from Yisomim she'll collect Ziboris, Uchsuvas Isha Istrichale, and we needed to specifically separate out and highlight the case of Ksuvas Isha, because Salkadaita Chamina, I might have thought that Mishum China Akilu Rabbanon Gaba. I might have thought that because we wanted either her to feel chen or for her to have chen in the eyes of others, the Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos, so there, because we want her to have chen, akilu barabanan, that maybe we should therefore say that she should get a beinanis and not a ziboris from the Yisomim, just to elevate her kamashmalan, that's not correct. So this is approach number one, is that really the line of Mar Zutra Bereder Rav Nachman is correct. We make a distinction that when a woman is collecting her ksuba from Yisomim, it's always Ziboris. When she's collecting from her husband, it's always Beinanis. And we had a Havamina that maybe because of China, again, either for her own well-being or for others to perceive her, that when it comes to collecting from Yisomim, maybe we would have changed the rule and said Beinanis Kamash Malan, that we don't. And then the din of Mar Zutra Bereder Rav Yochanan is upheld. Omar Rava Toshma, let's look at another brisa, 12 lines or so from the bottom, a little bit more. Rav Meir Omer Ksuvas Isha Beinanis. This was the line we saw at the brisa about 10 lines above. Rav Meir says that the ksuva of a woman is collected from Beinanis. Miman. From who? Who does she collect Beinanis from? Ilema Miyasme. If you want to say that a woman is going to collect properties that are Beinanis from Yisomim, that can't be. Less later, Rav Meir Hadatnan, he doesn't agree with our Mishnah on Mem Chesam and Beis and Ephraim Nichse Yisomim Ziboris. That can't be. That doesn't make any sense at all. Elalav, it must be that Rav Meir is talking about a case where the Ksuvas Isha is paid bebeinanis minei. Michlal, the Rabbanon, the dissenting opinion holds Savre Biziboris, and that would be a conflict of terms in regards to the Shita of Mar Zutra Bereder of Nachman too. So here the Gemara says, yet again, 10 lines or so from the bottom, lo, le'olam miyasme. Really, we're talking about a case of Yisomim. And v'shayni ksuvas isha mishum china. Totally different approach. The words sound the same, the cases are different. Rav Meir was of the opinion that a woman collects from her husband, even from Yisomim as a beinanis. Why? For the exact opposite reason that we said before. Mishum china, because we are concerned about her perception. It's exactly the opposite. So machlokes tanoim, if whether or not the chen of the isha plays a role when she's collecting from Yisomim. According to the first approach that we saw, when a woman is collecting a property when there's no cash for her ksuba, when she's collecting a ziboris, you might have thought that mishum china, because we want her to have an elevated status either in her own eyes or in the eyes of the community, kamash malan, too bad. you collect from Ziboris. Then comes along Rav Meir and says exactly the opposite. I hold that a woman does collect from Beinanis, even from Yisomim, against the din in our Mishnah from the open of the Perek. And he says, why? Mishum China. Amar Abaye, he says, wait, we have another brisa. Toshma, Hanizakin, Shaman lahen beidis, Ubalchov bebeinanis, Uksubas Isha Biziboris. This is our Mishnah. That when we're dealing with a case of nizakin, damages, we collect from the A-level properties. When we're dealing with a Balchov, we collect from B-level properties. Uksubas Isha Biziboris. And again, we analyze this price and try to figure out what is going on here. Miman. At the very last of the short lines, Ilema miyasme. If you want to say that we're saying that she collects Ziboris from Yisomim, my Ksubas Isha, no chiddush there. We already know from our Mishnah, Afilu Kol Haninami, because our Mishnah already said a separate din that applies to all cases of those who collect from Yisomim, that when you're collecting anything from a Yasom, it's always Beziboris. So therefore, the Gemara says, Zalalav, it must therefore be Minei, that when our Mishnah says Ksubas Isha Beziboris, that it's talking about from the husband. So what must be the case? Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov Hacha b'maya askin, and what must we be dealing with? Kigon shenaase orev l'nizkei beno, that a man became a guarantor for the nizakin, for the damages that his son did. Lebal chov beno, not only for the nizikin, but for any chov of the son, or l'ksuvas kalaso. In all cases like that, what do we see? It must be, what did the Brisa say? That for nizakin it's beidis, balchov it's beinanis, and ksubas isha ziboris. So v'hai kidina, and whatever the case may be, whatever the payments are, doesn't matter. Nizakin ubalchov demechayim gavu. That had it been the nizakin or balchov, the first two cases, if they're mechayim, ihunami kim megabe kim mechayim megabe. In both cases, if the son is alive when the nizakin has to be paid back, then that's beidis. If the son is alive when he has to pay a chov, then that's bebeinanis. However, ksuvas isha, typically speaking, is de la'achar misa gavya. This is an assumption of the Gemara that the ksuvas isha is always paid back, or often paid back after a husband dies. It's not always true, but it is an assumption of the Gemara. And says the Gemara la'achar misa miman gavya miyasme, because when he dies, what's left? What's left is Yisomim, and the Yisomim always pay miyasme. They always pay biziboris. So then, therefore, ihunami, the guarantor too, ki megabe kila achar misa megabe, that when the guarantor, the father, that when the father is taking care of the son's financial burdens after he dies, if it's after he dies, then it's also going to be ziboris. So then the Gemara asks a question, one that in fairness, we will not understand tonight, but we will understand in the future. The Gemara says 4 lines from the bottom, but b'teipuklei, that we have a separate halacha to arev de ksuva lo mishtabed, that when you become a guarantor for a ksuba, it's really not full financial responsibility like we typically assume for a guarantee. When I wanted to become a moel, I took out a loan from somewhere and my father co-signed. If I defaulted, they would hit my father's bank account 100%. Says the Gemara, really by ksuba, things are different. Again, we'll analyze that a little bit more. But perhaps we should say that when it comes to the din of a father being a guarantor for his son's ksuba to his wife, perhaps there's really not a proper shibud. Says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. It's bekablan. It's a higher level. A guarantor is where I'm taking some responsibility. A kablan is that you and I make a contract that I hereby explicitly say that you, my father, are responsible for all of my mishaps. And then the Gemara says, well, that's fine and good. Hanicha leman de amar kablan. Afal gav de lesle nichse lelova mishtabed shapir. I could understand that if we're dealing with a case of a kablan, that even though the lesle nichse lelova mishtabed shapir, that even though had it been that the son had no property when he made the deal, but because I'm a kablan mishtabe, therefore I am indebted to that person, I'm a full guarantor shapir. That makes sense. Elaman de Amar, but there is a shita that says that even by a kablan, if the son had properties mishtabed, then the father will be a kablan and have to pay the debts. And ilesle lo mishtabed, but if the son didn't have properties to function as a lien, then even the kablan wouldn't have to pay back. Ma'ikol meimar what would we say in such a case? So the Gemara gives two responses to this kabbalan relationship between a father and a son, and with these two answers, we'll close. It's very possible that even within the second understanding of kabbalan, that it depends as to whether or not the son had access to properties to pay his debts at the time that the deals were made. Really, the son did have those properties, and therefore the kabbalan is on the hook. The son did have the properties, but v'ishtaduf, the wind blew them away. And Rashi says v'ishtaduf hashta, they got blown away now after the fact. But there's another possible answer, and this is a very paternal answer. V'baisema kol legabe brei. Anything in regards to one's child, shiabudi mishabed nafshe. You can call yourself a kablan, you can call yourself an arev, you can call yourself a dad, a tati, I don't care what you call yourself. You're responsible for your child to a great degree. And therefore, even though it may be true that the son didn't even have the right kind of property at the time that he got married, but I'm the father and I'm responsible. And therefore, in such a case, I would be responsible for paying back the wife in this case. We'll stop right here and pick up Amir Hashem tomorrow with Daf Nun. Wishing you all a beautiful night.